Just like a real locomotive, your new C-19 needs regular maintenance and lubrication. Your new locomotive's gearbox has been lubricated at the factory and may not need additional lubrication. However, the running gear and other parts will require lubrication before the locomotive goes into service. Failure to perform this initial lubrication may result in damage to the locomotive and yield poor performance. There are many metal-to-metal connections and moving parts, just like a real steam engine, so it's important to take your time and lubricate them all properly. We recommend that you use Bachmann's line of Easy Lube products. However, other plastic-compatible lubricants designed for model railroad applications can also be used. To properly service the locomotive, place it in a position that allows easy access to the wheels, axles, and valve gear. You'll be working from the front of the locomotive to the back. Before you start, remember that over-lubrication can also cause damage, so use all lubricants sparingly. First, use heavy viscosity oil to lubricate the lead truck axle on both sides of the axle support brackets. Next, apply a drop or two of oil to the tip of the spring-loaded support plunger where it contacts the bottom of the locomotive frame. The plunger is located directly on top of the front truck. Next, put a drop of oil on the pivot points where the lead truck is attached to the frame. Use the heavy oil to work on the driver axles and frame axle bearings. Start by lubricating each of the driver wheel bearings behind each wheel. Put a drop on each side of the driver axle bearings where they sit in the frame. To do this, gently push down on the driver tire or side rod and put a small drop of oil onto the exposed driver wheel bearing. Be sure to lubricate the driver axle and frame axle bearings on both sides of the engine. Next, lubricate the Stephenson valve gear linkage, which is located in the frame between the first and second sets of drivers. Put a small drop of oil on each of the bearing points where there is metal joining metal, such as where the linkages and rocker arms connect with each other. Be sure to lubricate the reverse linkage axle, which is located well up in the locomotive frame. Now it's time to lubricate the driver crank pins and side rods. First, put a small drop of oil on both sides of the side rods where they connect with the crank pins. Don't forget to put a drop of heavy oil on each side of the main rod and side rod where they connect to the crank pin on the number 2 driver. Then put a small drop of oil on the joint connecting the side rod from the number 4 driver to the side rod just behind the number 3 driver crank pin. Do the same on the joint connecting the side rod from the number 1 driver to the side rod just in front of the number 2 driver crank pin. Remember to lubricate the crank pins and side rods on both sides of the locomotive. Next, lubricate the valve guides, the valve guide rods, piston rods, and the rocker arm assemblies that connect the valve linkage with the cylinder. Be sure to lubricate the rocker arm assemblies where they pass through the frame to connect to the Stephenson valve gear. Perform these lubrication procedures on both sides of the locomotive. Next, put a single drop of oil on each of the mechanical joints on the reach bar that connects the Johnson bar in the cab with the Stephenson valve gear. Now it's time to use Bachmann's conductive contact lube to decrease the amperage draw of your C-19 and enhance its electrical pickup. Put a drop of conductive contact lube on the tread of each driving wheel and on the axles next to each wheel's electrical pickup bearing. Next, put a small drop of conductive contact lube on the wheel treads of each of the tender's wheels, as well as on the end of each tender truck wheel axle where it enters the truck side frame bearing. Switching now to a light viscosity oil, put a small drop on the end of each tender wheel axle where it enters the truck side frame. The final steps to preparing your C-19 for operation are to put a drop of light oil on each of the coil springs on each of the tender trucks, and a small drop of light oil on the tender truck bolster where the tender truck attaches to the tender frame. We recommend that you perform each of these lubrication procedures after every 6 hours of operation. This should help you enjoy a lifetime of operating pleasure with your new Bachmann Spectrum large-scale C-19 locomotive.